She was 17 years old, had never commanded an army, and came from a tiny village in medieval France. Yet within months, this unknown peasant girl would stand before a king, enter a war that had lasted for generations, and become the symbol of a nation. Her name was Joan of Arc. But the most astonishing part of her story is not that she became a military leader. It is how anyone believed her in the first place. Why would a powerful king listen to an untrained teenage girl? What convinced experienced soldiers to follow her? And how did this mysterious young woman become one of the most famous figures in European history? To understand Joan of Arc, we have to go back to a France on the brink of collapse. France was not simply fighting for territory. The 100 Years' War had left the kingdom divided, exhausted, and politically unstable. The English controlled large parts of northern France, while their Burgundian allies dominated other territories. The French crown itself was weakened by years of conflict and internal rivalry. At the center of this crisis stood Charles, the uncrowned French heir, whose claim to the throne was challenged by England. Then, from the village of Domremy, came Joan. She was not a noblewoman, a scholar, or a trained soldier. Yet she believed she had a mission to reach Charles, convince him to continue the struggle, and help restore his authority. Her journey from an obscure village to the royal court was only the beginning. Joan's journey began in Domremy, a small village on France's eastern frontier. She was born around 1412 into a farming family during one of the most turbulent periods of the Middle Ages. As a child, she grew up surrounded by the realities of war, but there is no evidence that she received military training. What made Joan unusual was her intense religious devotion and the visions she later said she experienced. She described hearing the voices of saints who urged her to support Charles and help lift the siege of Orléans. By the time she was about 17, Joan had become convinced that she had a mission. She left her village and began a remarkable journey toward the French court, a journey that would take an ordinary peasant girl into the center of European history. Reaching the French court was far from simple. Joan first had to convince local officials that her mission was genuine enough to deserve attention. Eventually, she reached the court of Charles, the future king of France. According to later accounts, Charles tested her by disguising himself among his nobles, but historians treat this story cautiously because it comes from sources written after the events. What is certain is that Joan was eventually given an audience and examined by members of the royal court and clergy. They questioned her beliefs, her character, and her intentions. She was then equipped and sent toward Orléans, where the French position was under enormous pressure. For Joan, the moment had arrived when words would have to become action. By the spring of 1429, Orléans had become the critical point of the French struggle. English forces and their allies had surrounded the city with a network of fortified positions, placing enormous pressure on its defenders. Inside the walls, supplies were running low, and the future of the city looked uncertain. Then Joan arrived. Her presence immediately changed the atmosphere. She carried a white banner, spoke with remarkable confidence, and insisted that the French could break the siege. But Joan did not fight alone. Experienced commanders, soldiers, engineers, and the citizens of Orléans all played crucial roles. Her greatest impact may have been psychological. She gave people who had been expecting defeat a reason to believe victory was still possible. Joan's arrival did not magically win the siege. The fighting around Orléans involved experienced commanders, organized troops, engineering, supplies, and carefully planned operations. Joan's importance was that she became a powerful source of confidence at a moment when morale mattered enormously. She urged the French to act rather than remain behind their defenses. In the days that followed, French forces began attacking the English positions around the city. Joan was present near the action, carrying her banner and encouraging the soldiers, but she was not an all-powerful commander directing every movement. The victory that followed was the result of many people working together. Yet Joan's presence had become impossible to ignore, and the momentum was beginning to shift. The turning point came quickly. In May 1429, French forces launched a series of operations against the English positions surrounding Orléans. Joan's role was unusual. She was not simply a soldier, and the surviving evidence does not support the idea that she personally planned every operation. Instead, she became a remarkable presence on the battlefield, carrying her banner, urging the French forward, and refusing to accept hesitation. During one assault, Joan was wounded, yet she returned to the fighting soon afterward. The French captured key English positions one after another, and on May 8th, the English abandoned the siege. Orléans had been relieved. For the French, this was more than a military success. It was proof that defeat was not inevitable, and Joan had become the face of that transformation. After Orléans, Joan's influence grew rapidly. The French victory had changed the political atmosphere, and attention turned toward the Loire Valley and the road to Reims, where French kings traditionally received their coronation. Joan strongly supported the idea of taking Charles there. The journey was dangerous, but the French army moved through towns and territories that had previously seemed difficult to secure. In July 1429, Charles was finally crowned King of France at Reims Cathedral. Joan stood nearby with her banner, witnessing the ceremony she had helped make possible. She had begun as an unknown village girl, but within months she had become one of the most recognizable figures in France. Yet her greatest moment would also mark the beginning of a very different chapter. After the coronation, Joan's position became more complicated. Charles VII had achieved the goal she had supported, but the war was far from over. French leaders were divided over how aggressively to continue the campaign, while political negotiations with Burgundy created new uncertainty. Joan remained determined to keep pressing forward. In September 1429, she took part in an attempt to capture Paris, but the attack failed, and she was ordered to withdraw. The moment revealed a reality often hidden by later legends. Joan was not an unstoppable hero who won every battle. Her success depended on political decisions, military commanders, supplies, and circumstances beyond her control. Her extraordinary rise had reached its peak, and from this point forward, her story would become increasingly uncertain. In May 1430, Joan was captured near Compiègne by Burgundian forces allied with the English. She was sold to the English and eventually brought to Rouen, where she faced a church trial. The proceedings focused on her religious beliefs, her clothing, her visions, and her claim to divine guidance. Joan defended herself with remarkable confidence, often giving careful answers to difficult questions. But the trial was conducted under powerful political pressure, and she had no realistic path to an independent defense. In 1431, Joan was condemned and executed at 19 years old. Yet her story did not end there. Decades later, a new investigation examined the original trial and overturned the verdict. Joan of Arc had gone from an obscure village girl to a national symbol whose reputation would survive for centuries. Joan's life lasted only 19 years, but her impact reached far beyond her lifetime. The historical record shows a young woman who entered a political and military crisis at an extraordinary moment, inspired confidence among many French supporters, and became closely connected with the recovery of the French monarchy. At the same time, history has separated the real Joan from the legends that grew around her. She was neither a magical warrior nor an all-powerful commander. She was a determined teenager whose conviction, courage, and remarkable ability to inspire others made her unforgettable. Centuries later, Joan became a symbol of France and was eventually recognized as a saint. Her story survives because it raises a question that still feels timeless. How much can one person change when they believe their moment has finally arrived?